Now it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Chris Abani holds a BA in English from Birkbeck, from Nigeria and an MA in Gender and Culture from Birkbeck College at the University of London, and an MA in English and a Ph.D. in Literature and Creative Writing from the University of Southern California. It's a lot of degrees, Chris. I have 2. That's all I have. I need more. He, of course, is a professor here at UCR in our creative writing department. And he's a recipient of many degree awards, including the PEN USA Freedom to Write Award, the Prince Claus Award, a Lannan Literary Fellowship, a California Book Award, the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, a PEN Beyond Margins Award, the PEN Hemingway Book Prize, and the Guggenheim Award. Please join me in welcoming Chris Abani.
Good afternoon. I know it's hot. Good afternoon. Do you like my tassel? Makes me feel like a white girl. Commencement, very sad times. They're happy times and they're sad times. They're bittersweet and they're always very serious, and I don't do serious very well. So I thought we should start with a joke. How about that? All right. So in South Africa, you know, when apartheid ended and Nelson Mandela is getting sworn in as the president, and it was all wonderful. And then after the ceremony, 8 people are leaving Johannesburg, and they're in a small plane, and they're flying out of town, and then 30 minutes in, one of the engines dies, and the pilot says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. We need 2 volunteers to jump off the plane." Nobody moves. So he says, in the spirit of the new South Africa, we should go alphabetically. Will all the Africans please jump off the plane? And nobody moves. And so he says, will all the blacks jump off the plane? And nobody moves. And he says, will all the colors jump off the plane? And nobody moves. And so there's only 2 black people on board, a man and his son. And so the son says to the father, "Father, if we're not African and we're not black and we're not colored, what are we?" And the man said, "Today, my son, we're Zulus." Epigraph. Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew. Jack Gilbert. There is a truth about the universe that is almost never taught. It is a simple truth, and that is perhaps why we never learn it. It was a truth my grandfather explained like this: Mado anagagbana himbembeya. A person can never outrun their shadow. Of course, in the way in which all wisdom in Africa is dispensed in proverbs, I spent hours figuring out the hidden meaning of the words, the magic they would unlock. Finally, I approached my grandfather for an answer. He listened to my complicated reasoning and smiled. No, he said, none of that. It just means that there are 2 sides to everything. But then he went on to explain that each side creates the other. The shadow creates the thing, and the thing the shadow. They have the same import, the same weight in the world, he explained. I still wasn't sure what he meant, so I pressed him. It's easy, he said. When you stand up, you create an equal distance to fall. And so I said to him, is this like all those other ridiculous proverbs you keep telling me, like a man who is lying down does not need to fear to fall? He said, no. Years later, I realized he was trying to tell me that everything in our life is a balance between 2 forces. Forces that pull us up and keep us rooted simultaneously. He was saying you can only fly as high as you can measure the fall. It's funny that this truth should have been revealed to me, of all things, through a single line of poetry from an incredible American poet from Pittsburgh called Jack Gilbert. That line of poetry was the epigraph. Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew. This is the key to the lie inherent in everything we are often taught, that great failure is the shadow to great success, and great success is the twin of great failure. The more spectacular the failure, the more spectacular the success, and vice versa. It seems to me that our fear is intrinsically linked to our courage, and that denial is the only barrier to this realization. And there, my friends, is the real difficulty. Everything about 20th and 21st century thinking has been about shielding us from this truth, this knowledge that we make and unmake the world in which we live with equal measure and equal power. We have come to believe that education is not a way to prepare ourselves to confront the unknown, but a clear method of containing the unknown. Education has made us think that there is nothing that has not been mapped, catalogued, and archived for our study, and that if there is, then it's not worth knowing about, that it is in fact useless. That our own minds, our own ideas, the very lives we lead mean things only, or mean anything only so much as they've been ratified by institutions. This shielding ourselves from difficulty, from the knowledge that much of our lives is a product of a grace that is often beyond our understanding, has spilled out of the institutions of our nations, educational, judicial, religious, cultural, into the very way in which we live. So now we live in a nation that wants us to feel no pain, recognize no limit to our abilities, feel no fear, and yet care for no one but ourselves, while enacting policies that force us ever closer to lives of pain, limit, and fear. This denial, this culture of avoidance often means that we never really learn the true measure of ourselves, the true shape of our integrity, the full knowledge of what we can and cannot do. Instead, it makes us default to the setting that the world revolves around our small and often unmeasured lives. And while this is true on one level, because you have only yourself, you have only what you know you are, because you can never be anyone else, it is also untrue, because the world does not revolve around who we are. Currently, it revolves around who we can be. This is how we learn to be successful, because who we can be is dependent on knowing who we are now and learning to reach outside of that limit to be part of a bigger world. There was a time when, as we grew up, we were allowed to experience small failures, coming in last at sports, failing at reading, never quite making the bus, negotiating bullies. It was even more important that those small failures happened publicly because they taught us not to fear failure. Now, all of our failures are private, while only our successes are public and aggressively so, such that many young people like you feel that the successful have never tasted failure, creating a monstrous desire among us to be only glamorously successful, never understanding that all of it is built on years of the knowledge of failure. The true purpose of your education has not been to earn a degree, or become smarter at theory, or define yourself as better than others, or acquire the means to a better financial life. Those are wonderful byproducts, but true teachers will tell you that all of your education has been an attempt to learn empathy, to teach you the ability to place your desires next to those of others, such that you can become more than you ever imagined on your own. All that your teachers have taught you is this: to understand the difference between discernment and judgment. Discernment opens knowledge, expansiveness, understanding, empathy, and the application of these to a very rich life, while judgment, on the other hand, is always about your shame and the shame of others and what you project onto others and what they project onto you. Judgment is always about limitation and fear. In the time you have been here, we have taught you how to think, how to gather information, to analyze it, to trust your brain and intelligence. Now, you leave here with those tools, and you have to use them for something much bigger, something in many ways more important, but something you can only do on your own, and that is to explore, to map, and to learn the shape of your own heart. I use heart here not in the biological sense, but in the way it has been used for centuries, as the abode or the amalgamation of all the knowledge we are unable to express fully in language or share empirically, but which guides most of our living. And this, my friends, is where failure becomes your ally. Success and stories about success don't teach us anything. They may affirm our hopes and confirm that it is possible. Success teaches us to emulate, but to emulate is to copy, and the world is never made better or more spectacular by facsimiles, only by originals. Failure teaches the way to success. Remember my grandfather. This is what he meant. If a thing and its shadow are commensurate, then you can only succeed in proportion to your failure. T.S. Eliot, who was more famous than my grandfather, said, "Only those who risk going too far can find out how far they can go." And Thomas Edison said, "I make more mistakes than anyone I know, and then eventually I patent them and I make money from them." I'm not trying to teach you some transcendent truth about failure, that it is always about ugly ducklings becoming swans. Failure sucks. It sucks and it hurts. And sometimes ugly ducklings just become ugly ducks. Sorry. Half of the value of failure is simply in the fact of it. The fact that we reached beyond ourselves emboldens us to reach again and to reach for even more. Failure teaches us to explore, to experiment, to fail, and then repeat, this time with a little bit more knowledge. Failure teaches us to use our fears to grow. It is said that Edison was afraid of the dark, and that's why he invented the light bulb. It's a true story. But like I said, failure offers no real life lessons. There's no Oprah here, no Dr. Phil. When you were cleaning the floor in a 7-Eleven at 3 a.m. in the morning, your degree tucked in your back pocket, failure will not be transformational. But that is its value. That by failing, we learn to tolerate the prospect of failing. And that is what helps you become ambitious and bold in choosing your future. Failure teaches you the limits of your success and abilities, but that is something you must discover for yourself by living it, by failing. You must not let your parents, your jobs, your professors, or anyone else determine the limits of your own failure, because that means you are letting others determine the limits of your success. Turn instead to us only for comfort, for wisdom, for help, for the knowledge that it is possible. It is a lonely road growing up, but you must walk it alone. And do not be afraid of losing love or losing people, because through that pain of loss, you will find out more about yourself and your infinite power of light than you could ever imagine. What truly shapes us is not the good times, but the heartbreak, because in knowing how far you can fall, you realize how tall you can stand. But you cannot have one without the other. This is a truth that everyone forgets to tell you. Life is a symphony, and the people within our lives are the orchestra, and the events that occur are the instruments that shape us. And when you lose, when you break an instrument, your life comes out of tune. But then you know now that it is not the orchestra or the symphony that needs fixing. It is simple, one small instrument. You can rewrite the story of your life. When I was 16, I published my first novel. By 18, I was in jail for that very novel. And through my life, I have endured much loss. I have been a refugee, an illegal immigrant. I have endured torture and suffering, and I have caused much suffering to others. I have broken my parents' hearts, and I have made them proud. I have and continue to fall short of the simplest graces. And yet I stand here today, a spectacular failure, who has rewritten not just my life, but the lives of many of you here today. Failure and rejection and loss expand your dreams and therefore expand your potential. Don't be afraid of them. Learn from them and then embrace yourself in the world you live in. It is more beautiful than you could ever imagine, and you are going to make it even more beautiful. But do it now, while you are young and you still burn with hope. Do it now. Travel the world, invent new ways of being, write a book that no one can yet imagine. Much of my journey of transformation has been through literature, through the hearts of the best failures on this planet, writers. I have never lost the magic of belief because of the words of men and women like this, like you. We are all Jedi and Sith, and Ravensclaw and Slytherin, and Knight and Dragon, and whatever words shape your transformation. We have prepared you well. I know this. I know the power of my colleagues. So on their behalf, my Padawans, I say to you, go into the world and fail spectacularly and transform us all into beings of a beauty we are yet incapable of imagining. Thank you.